Hello, everybody. Welcome. It is in the standardized phony calendar, which reduces everything to a static, irrevocable map every second, every minute, every hour, every day, every cycle. Today is known as the 31st of October here in San Francisco. It's a beautiful sunny day here where I am right now. And I invite you to join me, as always, in an expedition, an adventure in unforgetting, or one of my favorite terms, anamnesis, right? This is the reversal of amnesia. A force and a problem that is ever present in unimaginably complex ways, moment to moment, in our modern lives, dominated as we are by machines, myriad psychosocial manipulations and operations. All of the possibility space of our humanity, our sensitivities, the myriad intelligences that coalesce in every human being and every being, the plants, the animals, the insects, the water creatures, the tiny life, all of these things, all of these beings and their relationships. Occluded though it may seem, and in many ways be, that possibility space belongs to each of us. Our hearts, our souls, our origins, our true natures, and our capacity to recover, nurture, nourish, and sustain them together, with and for each other, and the history and future of life, not merely on Earth, but on all worlds, in all of time. The false, explicit localization that is imposed on our thought and conception by language, society, modernity, enculturation, manipulation, amputation, and lying is something I do not merely oppose, but I work to undo. However humbly and incompletely and ineffectively. My activity is or may be seen as. My passion is liberation and justice as reconciliation, not war or punishment. Rejuvenation. I have a variety of bookmarks in mind today. But I want to talk about this let's see if I can find the right word. This suffix that was common in many of the words that I was recently speaking. Words like liberation, rejuvenation, exploration, fascination. So, when I had for me at least, monumental experience of contact with what I understand to be an NHI complex, or being. Of course, what a being is almost always a complex. In 2002, and then again, somewhat differently, in late 2009, I went through an unimaginable process of re-education and active anamnoetic revelations. There's another one, revelation. Yeah. And one aspect of that process had deeply to do with the nature and origins of language, and particularly alphabets. This relates to processes, it is related to but not encompassed by processes sometimes spoken of as gematria in relation to Hebrew. I'm not sure, there must be a similar Arabic array of skills and insights. I just don't know its name. Perhaps it's called the same thing. And in Greek, it was isosophy. I am sure there must be something similar in Sanskrit and many other languages. I don't have the entire lexicon of the nomenclature. However, it turns out that from an array of astonishing perspectives, the letters in our alphabet, mostly having been imported, if we're talking about the English alphabet, piecemeal from other cultures and other alphabets, perhaps primarily Greek, and to some degree, forgive me, Amon Hillman, Hebrew, or Proto-Hebraic. These letter forms, contrary to our common understanding, represent fundamental principles and may even be understood as angels in a sense, because they are not merely static principles. They are active principles that transform certainly consciousness at the very least, but that with which we use the term reality to refer to, which is a very unfortunate idea, this idea of reality, because it presents it as static, objective, empirical, comprehensible to the static tools and processes that are inherent in formal representational cognition, and the forms of knowledge that, while useful in their scope, are dead inside, tool-like, mechanistic, and by their existence and activity foment a variety of successful gambits that obliterate insight imagination, wisdom, theoria, perspectival liberation, and the roots from which our potentials for freedom arise. There's been a very concerted attack on these principles for some epochs in relatively recent human history. These attacks were primarily fomented by organized religions. And there may have been some useful purpose there at some point. Nothing that could possibly justify what has occurred and what is still going on. But we don't want to throw the entire affair away. However, over the past perhaps 200 years, the primary warfighters against the beauty and liberation necessary and inherent in all human beings has been science, unfortunately. This isn't to say that I oppose science, which is of course a catch-all term. Whatever science may be will differ depending on why we are looking or asking about it, how we are doing so, and what our concerns are. We're talking about a vast, complex topology of methods, research, published and unpublished results, analysis, speculation, interpretation of data, and so forth. So a vast forest, a vast topology of related systems. But I'm a little bit at risk of bird walking here, so I'm going to circle back to why I began to speak of the letters. And particularly this suffix, A-T-I-O-N. Various people who might be classified as autistic and this again is a vast topology, a spectrum of unique features of awareness, consciousness, concern, attention, and so forth. Not one thing, right? This is one of the great dangers. We have this word autism and we think, oh, I know what that is. It's this. It's never that. The moment you think you know what it is, you definitely do not know what it is. And the same thing is true with science. And the same thing is true with nearly every word. Particularly words that refer specifically or explicitly to some situation in awareness that we hope to snip off and capture and re-present to consciousness with a token. This is the grave danger in human cognition, to tokenize phenomena, relationships, quote, functions, unquote, and so forth. So this A-T-I-O-N suffix is very profound. In chemistry, and perhaps also in physics, we use this word ion to refer to a specific feature of molecular chemistry. I cannot define it for you. I'm not a chemist. I merely know that this word is used in this way. But I want to talk about this ation suffix, briefly at least, and shed some light on it. Autistic folks, and similarly schizophrenic folks, who may also be either semi-autistic or so forth. And forgive me if anyone takes offense to my language. I'm speaking without inhibitions. Yeah. I'm not trying to concern myself with who might take offense or who might not. Rather, I just wish to speak. I am well aware that the labels are strange and have been used for dangerous purposes that I mistrust. Nonetheless, I will speak freely, using the language I am familiar with. I do not know any other way to speak. So, this ation suffix can be understood sort of magically or in a transcendental perspectival angle or angel. This angle and angel thing have a lot to do with each other. I'll say the simplest thing I can first say. So imagine that in a children's explanation, all that exists is the fruit of the tree, the primordial tree. Right? And this ation suffix, the T refers to this tree. The A can be understood to refer to origin or indicate origination. So one could understand, I think usefully, playfully, the first tree radiates information. Right? A-T-I-O-N, information. Yeah. And there is also a prosaic or onomatopoeia aspect of not shunning. Do not shun. Yeah? So we might decode this ation as at the first tree's shared transmission spirit, ation, transmitted in and for and with all beings and minds in all of time. This ion phoneme, if that's the right word, can also be similarly prosaically understood as the eye turns on, right? Seeing awakens to its own origin and nature. The eye can be understood, you've got this line with a little dot at the top, and that dot at the top can be understood to represent origin. Shining in every moment, alive, investing and creating moment to moment all beings. That little dot. In the capital letter, the top horizontal line can be understood as origin, and then the branch down as the transmission, right, back and forth. The co-influence, the co-emergence, the co-instruction, the co-information. And then the bottom horizontal line can be understood as physical reality, the physical layer of the dandelion. So this is the I. The O, okay, so you've got the dot at the top and then the line represents the appearance of individuals, right? The seeming distinctness of any being that we might distinguish as separate. That form of distinguishing is provisional. It's not real. The separateness is not real. It's something we impose according to various purposes in cognition, awareness, thought, consideration, evaluation, analysis, and so forth. Notice how many Asians, right, are in my language. It's not on purpose. This suffix is profusely instanced in English. So you have the A representing firstness, origination, progeneration. The T representing the tree, or the web-like structure instantaneously connecting all beings and minds in all of time and space and beyond. The I, the appearance of individuals, right, followed immediately by the O. And the O can be understood as unity, communion, re-origination, fundamentally all beings not merely as a single one, but the principle of unity that pervades over all things. And then the N is novelty, newness, numinousness, negation of falsehood. Now, these letters do not always have the same meaning roots. This game is meant to be played quite creatively. Thus, there is no explicit lexicon of the meanings of the letters that one could trust. One has to see them in context and see which letters came before them in a word, which letters are on either side of them, the right or the left, which letters come before or follow them. And the spirit of play and insight must pervade over one's, should, right? Pervade over any desire for an explicit lexicon of the meanings and powers and origins of the letters, in my view, in my understanding. I hope that this may foment revelation for you. This little bird walk here about Elation. You know, words like nation, nation, right? A new way of doing the Elationing, right? Or station, right? To form a pattern which is re-inhabited over time. This is the S word. It is like the snake, that is like the waveform, that is like that which divides by going, right? The snake is sort of a living waveform that both divides and unifies by traveling. So it was not really my intention to cover that today. I have another intention. It's not particularly pressing, but I'll do my best to explore it. From what I have come to understand in my studies of specific topics in neuroscience, and particularly studies that orbit the processes of reproduction, primarily I am familiar with mammals. The egg and sperm, their joining, the transformations that thereafter take place, the sequence of those transformations, and so forth. And some of my understandings may be outdated. I'm not trying to be right. I'm attempting to see better, as usual. But what I understand is that along with the cellular population, right, even before a child is born, a human child, cellular populations undergo a complex process of two processes: the differentiation of pluripotent cells into all of the cell types that are native to the mammalian body, and those comprise approximately, I think, a little less or a little more than half of the cells in a human. All the rest are acquired from nature. These are bacteria. Then we have viruses, still quite mysterious to human science. But the cells undergo differentiation, and then they undergo culling. Right? They are culled. Vast numbers of cells die. Your hands start out as paddles, and then I'm at a loss for the word I actually want. It's not culling. Well, that's okay. I'll continue. Perhaps it'll come to me. So there's an extinction event, a long series of extinction events, and one of them wipes out, I don't know what the actual number is, but a wild guess would be 60% of your original population of neurons. Right? And in case this isn't obvious, what that produces, imagine you have a sphere, right, and you just start subtracting. Say the sphere is made of trillions of cells. Right? And you just start subtracting cells all over the space inside the sphere until what remains is a tree structure. Right? Turns out that this T letter in the Asian suffix is the basis of knowledge itself, our lexicons, computation, mathematics, everything that we are familiar with. It is, it's hard to find a better metaphor than a tree. Yeah? So, early in infancy, there's a complexly structural devastation to the neuronal population, which I believe is mediated by prion proteins. This is what I came to understand in the 90s. Research may have advanced since then. You may recognize prion proteins from having read about Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, otherwise known as mad cow and so forth. These prion proteins, like many features of our biology, when they escape or are no longer subject to the mediating aspects that keep them sort of in line, so to speak, they rip the brain to shreds. Probably the nervous system too. But they're absolutely crucial to the formation of our nervous systems, and particularly our brains. The same is true, of course, of various bacteria. E. coli, absolutely necessary for our digestive systems and health. But if they escape their proper context, much like structured representational cognition escaping its useful scope, the result is devastation. Right? Deva, right? A possibly angry, destroying, or vengeful warrior-like divine principle. Devastation. So these processes that we undergo in infancy result in the complex structure of our nervous systems and brains. And similar processes might be understood to be prevalent in all aspects of nature, right? There's that A-T-U-R-E. Right? You recapitulate, you resonate energy, U-R-E. The tree, right? Novel origin of the tree universally radiating energy, emancipation, experience. Now, one of the results of the processes that we undergo throughout our lives, but especially in infancy with the die-off of the neurons, it leads to a situation inside the body where routes become crucially important. The between space of neurons and the map, if you will, of the nervous system. We don't really know how solar systems form, but we might imagine that it's not dissimilar to that sphere, where you have a sort of cloud-like, unstructured beginning, and things coalesce, congeal, and disappear into a highly structured remnant, which is a star, its planets, their moons, and so forth. And you can see the same principle instanced at each scale, right? That which forms a star similarly forms planets, and they similarly form moons. Although, again, we don't actually know how this happens since we've never been able to observe it. Even if we could observe it, a mechanical perspective is insufficient to tell us what's going on. So what I wanted to talk about today is the importance of routes in relation to memory. And memory is so fundamental that it is impossible to overstate or capture its importance. Without it, you have nothing like a mind or cognition or identity or anything, right? So memory is a holophore, a fundamental principle without which all other principles disappear. And habits and activities can be understood to result in something called canalization, which is the establishment and maintenance of structures in the nervous system that allow the pianist, who is constrained monumentally in physical space, right? They're sitting in one spot at a keyboard. But they achieve within that highly constrained context radical, magical liberations, ecstasies, transformations, and beauty. Right? So you can see that it's the constraint, in a way, that creates the potential for liberation. and the canalization in the nervous system and in brains of the routes and relationships and the forms of energies that are exchanged among neurons and cohorts of neurons over time transcend their own structure, right? The structure provides the basis for their transcendence, in this sense. So it isn't as if structure is bad or undesirable, but the same thing that comprises a trap that is lethal in the sense of causing amnesia, loss of liberty, can, under other circumstances, specifically provide liberation. The bird's wing is an excellent example. The hundreds of wings of our interiority, most of which we are unfamiliar with, having suffered their amputations and inhibitions in childhood. You can see it is the structure of the bird's wing, which is highly flexible, that gives it the capacity for flight. In humans, it is our hands that are primarily, our entire bodies, of course, our eyes, our physical senses, and so forth. All of these instruct or instructure the nervous system over time. Opspini, the white-cheeked geese, the Blackfoot word for them. So it turns out that routes, and particularly physical routes traversed by humans, are fundamental to the nature of human cognition and its potentials. And routes within our homes that we traverse repeatedly, routes within the physical environment, presuming that there is some physical environment, and not just a bunch of streets and buildings, but even those. All of these dramatically affect our potential for human cognition, and this is part of why people like Thoreau and others who wandered across the living spaces of Earth in their lifetime, eschewing a settled existence with a home and security and so forth, became prodigies of beings, organisms, animals, humans, and transcendental beings. Because their routes were in the living body of nature rather than along roads, right? Or between rooms in a home. And this liberty and the incredible novelty and depth and beauty of nature, the infinite novelty, depth, and beauty of nature, informed their minds, right? Enformed and informed. And their souls, and their histories and futures, and their lineages, and the lineages of other beings who never met them through writings and so forth. When I am speaking, even today, I was at a loss for a word that is used to refer to the process of the neuronal die-off. And that is a routing problem, right? There are structures in the brain, but also in the non-physical aspects of cognition that link up features of memory and the capacities for articulation in speech or thought. And when there's a mismatch, we often, it's on the tip of my tongue, we may say in English. Meaning we know it, but we cannot find it. This is a route problem. And I'll tell you a little secret about this. When you have this experience and you're trying to find a word or a name, the common intuition or instinct is to just keep poking at it. As if you have like a stick and you're poking at something. That intuition or instinct is contrary to what is most useful. I don't know what is most useful, but what is useful is to circle, right? To just circle like a planet orbiting a sun. Because if you have a single point of approach, and that point of approach is failing, doubling down on that is unlikely to help you. But circling is very likely to suddenly reveal the route in memory, which is usually a route in a connotation space, not a denotation space. In other words, the associations that the term that we are seeking has are what will link it and make it accessible again. So this is the difference between a direct approach and a circular approach. And in many cases, especially those relating to insight, wisdom, liberation, and so forth, circling is unimaginably profound. This principle is instanced in most advanced martial arts, but particularly in those I am aware of in Bagua and Tai Chi. The circle is primordial in these arts and overcomes angles effortlessly. Right? The direct angular punch is extremely powerful, but it's very difficult to land such a strike on someone whose nervous system and body has become a flowing unity in a family of circles. Notice the family of circles is a principle intrinsic to time-space and is the basis of what we understand the solar system to be doing. It's a family of orbital relationships over time.
That's nice. Oh, sorry. Just have a...
To introduce novelty into the physical routes you traverse, hopefully in living places like the one I'm in now, which is built by humans but filled with organisms, heals and nourishes memory, dreaming, and the mind, the brain, the nervous system. The nervous system is, well, I'm not actually sure what to say here. Perhaps I'll just pause for a moment and circle. If you examine your relationships carefully, you will find them fraught with routes of various kinds and habits. And where these are artificially constructed, reinforced, compelled, you will naturally find a variety of disease-like dangers and losses of liberty. It should be obvious that it is not sufficient to be free to do as you will. Right? There must be contexts in which that freedom becomes embodied, becomes transcendental. And as these contexts disappear from our common experience and are replaced by representations, and particularly exchanges of electronic information, our nervous systems are collapsing into decoherence, desynchronization, and various kinds of what could reasonably be understood as living death. There are forces at play in the human sphere that are dire, mechanical, malignant, limiting. And one of the things they want to capture is our capacity for the freedom of routes, right? For freedom of movement, of travel. Not just on the physical surface of the earth, but in cognition, in awareness, in behavior, in attention. There was significant research some time ago done by neuroscientists on the memory and flexibility of the minds of London cab drivers. These are people who have in their minds a sort of a living map, if you will, of the incredibly complex structure of streets and locations in London. This was before the onset of things like GPS. And it was found, if I remember correctly, that these cabbies had profound faculties and resilience in memory that was nourished and sustained by their constant interaction in memory and physical space with these complex routes. Now, many of our metaphors that underlie our conceptions about life, the universe, and everything are route-based and map-like. But there's a radical difference between a physical map and having a living map in one's memory, like Thoreau must have had, like most of the old cabbies had. And you will notice that over the past, say, 15, 10, 5 years particularly, these faculties are being obliterated by machines. Right? You no longer need to know how to get from point A to point B. You simply get in a machine and it tells you how to get from point A to point B. And although it may include some information about current situations and circumstances, the freedom of the soul to select and reroute in process is not merely diminished, it's obliterated. The most efficient route between 2 points is not the most desirable route. The most desirable route, or even a more desirable route, is any route that introduces positive novelty or even ambiguous novelty, and in many cases, negative novelty is crucially important. So this idea that, well, what I really want to do is just get from A to B is bullshit, deadly to human cognition. We are animals. First we are beings, then we are organisms, then we are animals. And similarly, first we are the universe, then we are the galaxy, then we are the solar system, then we are this star at this moment, then we are this moon here now at this time, then we are this world and her history and future, then we are, then at the same time the other wing of that bird is we are souls, we are beings, We are organisms, we are animals, we are humans, we are this human. Now, what you can see when I make these maps, right, that I just made, is that there are routes of relation, origination, potential for liberation, for revolution, for sensation, that are the anatomy of origin, being, nature, and thought, cognition. You know, I am traversing a route right now that I'm very familiar with, but one of the things I wanted to suggest is that wherever possible, you resist the urge to always take the same route. And similarly, you resist the urge, or resist the compulsion, to travel along routes dictated by some machine, or an electronic map, or a computer, because whatever controls your routes controls your mind. It controls your life path, it controls your fate, it controls your destiny, it controls your capacities for creativity, freedom, for learning, which primarily involves the capacity to make mistakes. Right? We rarely learn by getting it right. We learn by not getting it right. So if you want to grow and learn and be free, you must take novel routes in thought, in concern, in perspective, in the purposes that orient what you pay attention to. And in order to do that, we need help, right? We need input. That is novel and new to our experience. And when you're simply going from A to B, and that's your only goal, you tend to become unaware of the between of those two spaces, and it's that between that brings you to life, that resurrects your awareness and your attention and your intelligences. Right? All of that is in the between, not in the product, not in the result. Much of us dies in the aftermath of concerns about what we call security, safety, predictability, efficiency, effectiveness, and so forth. You can see over history the constraining of routes. First, with the invention of roads and trails. Certainly easier to pass through a wilderness on a trail than to become the trail, right? To pathfind, to trailblaze. And imagine all of the faculties that are involved when you're in a place that has no set routes inscribed in it, no grooves in the terrain, and you must trace and find and make and become the route. Yeah? Imagine the difference in growth, the intense adventure and beauty, and the faculties that must remain awake, oriented, creatively integrated with the terrain, perspectively, perceptually, cognitively, even analytically. So on the one hand, where you have a set route, a road, you will miss all of the between, or nearly all of it, though your senses may take little snapshots along the way, perhaps. But if you are forging a route, even if you are forging a route in a city, right, and you traverse that route on foot, or somewhat less profoundly but still different from in a car, on a bicycle or a motorcycle, your mind, your nervous system have an experience of the between that is much more intimate and alive. And that between is everything for developmental success and efflorescence. Love that word, flowering. It turns out that lexicons can be understood as a tree of routes between their components, right? And most of what we usually pay attention to are the denotations, what we call the definitions. By the way, that word definition, it's got that suffix tion, but with an I in front of it, like cognition. But we think it's the definitions that are important. The definitions are mostly useless without the associations. It's the connotation space around a word that determines its natures, meanings, and also how we would access it in the mind. Yeah? The routes are associations. They're not lines, right? They're cloud-like structures with a number of different trees inside the cloud. And this gives us vastly greater access and freedom and developmental momentum then, this relates to that across this line, and it's a singular, angle that connects these two things, and that's what connects them. Yeah, bullshit. Again, useful in a very tiny scope of what we may do or see or become as representational cognitives. But when that usefulness escapes its proper scope and comes to dominate universally over the entire sphere of the possibility space, you've got dead minds walking. One moment. Now, it's natural to have habitual routes and familiar terrains and territories and so forth for most animals. But think about what the animals do when they are migrating together, right? And how profound this truly is. Many of these migrational paths are tens or hundreds of thousands of years old. I've watched animals even in my own, city space, traversing the same routes generation after generation through the fences and the roads. To get into the backyards where the food is. I've seen probably 10 generations of raccoon families following the same route. So think about this migration again. And what they are doing is extremely profound if you can see into it. It's transcendentally, unimaginably profound. It's infinitely profound. In fact, if you could just simply more deeply understand this one concept, this one behavior, it would obliterate most of what you think and believe about the nature of, quote, reality, unquote. These routes that are followed during the migrations, they are the routes inscribed by endless lineages of ancestors over the changing landscape of the surface of the planet, and this local this localization of the entire universe that we call the Earth. Right? This changing fluid localization, this mother world, this beauty, this impossible, ecstatic place of life in time-space. So they are following the same paths followed by endless of their ancestors in a group, right? So you have a family, each with unique ancestral trees, following the same paths, day after day, season after season, year after year, decades, century, millennia, epoch, again and again. These are living paths, right? They are alive. They are not roads. Right? In fact, they are more than merely alive. They are life-preserving, life-giving. They are holy. Yeah? They are divine. They are magical. If the animals had to follow only roads or strict structures on the surface of the earth or in the sky, they would perish, okay? As we shall perish in doing so. So I want you to think about the relationship between routes and your capacity to entertain ideas, to experience insight, to have transcendental and non-ordinary experiences in your life, mind, heart, life path, history, future. We think, oh, history is written in stone. It surely is never written in stone. Only a dead thing would think that way. What we do today transforms the meaning of all histories. What we do right in this moment. It changes the route relationships between events by changing the meanings of their eventual outcomes. So we may think, well, no, the events are written in stone. You can't change those. The events only have meaning as the future arises. It is this moment and future moments that determine the meaning of historical events. These are routes in time and relation, over time in relation. R is to radiate. O is to unify. U is the cup that gathers together. T is the tree. E, the tree that collects all beings and influences their relationships and transformations. And E is emergence, efflorescence, sometimes escape. Now, when we traverse routes that are dead inside, that deadness accrues within us. Right? And when we traverse living routes, conversely, when we forge living routes together in cognition, relation, thought, consideration, perspective, understanding, that livingness is sustained. We have a holy duty to sustain these living routes, to forge them, to alert each other to the dangers of dead routes, and to gather with and for each other in the act of composing living paths. This is the nature of nature. It is the nature of life. And, death is not bad, intrinsically. Nothing is intrinsically this or that. This is one of the fallacies imposed on us by the strange relationships we have with language and representational cognition. Death is not bad. But the mechanical, dead inside features of our common modern experience are certainly horrific. They're not merely negative, but no free being would submit to their tyranny, to the malignancy of these. We must be first rendered unfree, starving for meaning and relation and adventure and the heroic development of our beingness, to become susceptible to such to this kind of tyrannical death of structure, death of diverse anatomy that is sort of the opposite, right? It's much more like the mad cow disease than it is like the die-off of neurons that produces the possibility of nervous systems in infancy and brains. So these things, I say, are bad. We should certainly do any other thing than comply with them. Routes are not merely physical transits between locations. They are also behavioral, memorial, cognitive, relational, psychological, spiritual, and so forth. So this is an infinitely complex topic, and I certainly have not done it justice today. But this seems like a good place to pause and to remember how grateful I am for this opportunity today to still be alive.
Remember, you said to me.
This word remember, it literally means to re-become a route, an array of routes of associations and connotations and perspectival orientations. Remember. It also obviously means like bring back together. Remember. I'm so grateful for this time. I'm so humbled by my experiences of being alive, even with all of their challenges and the suffering that I have experienced and continue to experience. Please take a moment to support the channel or my work in any way that feels natural to you. Like, share, leave a question, an insight, a criticism. Participate in the ways that feel good for you. I deeply appreciate those who support my work directly. There's 4 or 5 of them maybe. Actually more like 2 or 3. But I'm so grateful to them. Your support allows me to continue to learn and explore, and myself remember. So I'm very grateful to all of you who listen, particularly to those who listen to the entire recording, which turns out to be extremely rare, apparently. So thank you for joining me. I wish you insight, liberation, beauty, and the fulfillment of the promise of your human incarnation. Thank you. Much love and all blessings to you and yours. I look forward to learning together again very soon. Bye-bye for now.